you think from the time you decided that you were going to serve, like until you came home, what was the hardest thing that you dealt with emotionally?
Sometimes it's alone. The hardest thing is the loneliness, because you're alone. And by about 8 o'clock at night, everything is pitch black, nothing's moving, and you're not going to go out. So you go to bed. And then you wake up with the boosters at about 4:30, 5, and you're always alone. And you had to, I think it's naturally human to want to communicate, but Spanish is not my first language, and it actually wasn't theirs either. They spoke Aymara. So that was something. Yeah, loneliness. And kind of a fearfulness, too, that you'd get the job done, that you wouldn't, fold and have to go home and get sick, or, you were conscientious that you wanted to do it, but you weren't always sure you were able to pull it off.
Well, I guess this is a question. There's a kind of energy that I ran out of, and I remember meeting some Peace Corps volunteers who, I just, from time to time, be really tired. And I think part of that has to do with going long periods without speaking English, because you come to realize how much English matters to you. And so I think married volunteers have a certain advantage in that respect. But maybe that and that constant question that you are sort of either asked or presented with, are you representing the government, gets very tiresome. I think that's a real negative.
I would say definitely the most difficult thing, the most challenging thing was the language. Because in my case, I was in a small village where everyone spoke Hausa and they didn't speak anything else. So it was either speak Hausa with them or nothing. And that puts a lot of pressure on you to try to sit down, try to learn the language. We had 2 months of language training at our training site near the capital before we were placed in our village. So we're not placed there without knowing anything. But there's only so much you can learn in 2 months, and then the rest is on your own. So in my case, learning the local language was the biggest challenge of my service. And it really, unfortunately, by the time I got done, about 2.5 years later, I finally felt like I was finally starting to get the language, and like that's what you need to be able to live with the people, to interact with them, to talk with them, to do your work as a volunteer, whatever you're there to do. So it's just one of those things where if Peace Corps was a 5-year program, you get to the end of your 5 years and feel the same way, like, oh, I'm just starting to get it now. So that was my biggest challenge.
Yes, I have 2 specific questions. The first one about the situation in Georgia, and I'd like to get an answer from an insider perspective. So, do you personally think that American diplomacy rose to the level of expertise required by such a critical situation? And then I have another question related to the alleged recruitment by the CIA of...
Say it again, loud.
By the alleged recruitment by the CIA of Peace Corps or former Peace Corps volunteers. When were you personally approached? Was it here or there? And do you have any knowledge of the CIA approaching former Peace Corps volunteers and trying to debrief them once they got back?
Was that question for me or?
No, for
Kathy.
who started
CIA, yeah.
Bolivia.
No, I don't know anybody personally who was recruited, certainly not stateside.
No, but I mean approached, not recruited.
Approached, once we were abroad,
Well, you mentioned that you were asked by some people, unidentified people, to, I don't know, come up with a
To
structure
supply
of...
information
Yes.
about the power structures in
Yes.
our villages. It's hard to recall, it's so long ago. I think it must have come from people served in the Foreign Service in the embassy. And I know that our Peace Corps director, actually, the rumor among the volunteers was that our director said, to the effect, keep your hands off my volunteers, we're here to do a job. So that was that. The rumor that got going in the newspapers that we were vaccinating people started by some probably leftist group that wanted the U.S. out and decided that one way was to give us a black eye by saying these vaccinations are actually CIA inspired. It's sort of like saying, you know, they're putting fluoride in the water. We were vaccinating people, but we certainly weren't trained by CIA. So I don't know anybody who was recruited, but I was aware of an attempt to have people supply information to some Americans in the embassy. This is an era when Che Guevara was raising heck, right? So it was very politically very hot. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yes, you did. Thank you.
And if I may add, there's a pretty extensive legal clearance, background clearance that you must go through to be a Peace Corps volunteer. And if you have any sort of relationship or even dealings with the tip, you're not going to make it in. That's in the enabling statutes. You can look it up in the Federal Register and the Code of Federal Regulations.
I have.
Yes. Regarding Misha Saakashvili,
Yes.
the president of Georgia, he's a nutcase. A very intelligent nutcase. He's trained as a U.S. lawyer, and I had the opportunity to meet him a couple times. We were rock stars, and, you know, being that we're here to help you fix your country, there's a problematic statement. Very nice man. Let me explain a little bit, 2 sentences about Georgian culture. It's very much immediate, not much planning, and it's very nationalistic. They've constantly been colonized throughout history by one group or the other. Persians have come through, the other side has come through, pretty much wherever they're connected to another landmass, they've been attacked. The area that is hot right now is a separatist region, and the people who live there look no different than the Georgians. They speak a slightly different dialect, but there are so many around there because of the high mountains that everyone speaks a different dialect. They all know Georgian. My guess probably is that some night there was a big party, and it was decided on the spur of the moment we should go get our countrymen back. And so they went out there not realizing that the people who lived there had intermarried with you know, the people who lived next door who happened to be Ossetian, and you just sort of blend culturally, and of course that triggered what we see now. It was rash on Georgia's part, for sure. They probably provoked the heavy part of the fighting. But that conflict's been simmering for years now, and I don't think Saakashvili handled it very well, nor did we. We've got strategic interests right now in that particular region. We were there as a tool of foreign policy, I still think, namely for energy, oil-wise. Russia's got a huge oil empire right now, and that is seen as threatening. So we can't afford to, you know, torque off the Russian by sending in our tanks to Georgia, who is essentially a little gnat on Georgia's armament. But at the same time, Georgia helps us out a lot in our current military conflicts, and they think we're good, and we think that's a nice thing. So we have to do something. So we sent them out $200 billion. I don't know where it'll go. I don't think it was a good thing on either party's part, but I guess the end run is it's complicated politics, and it's not going to just end